Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Shira from Quackalope.
And today we are doing a Play This Not That of the Great Wall.
And the...
Start again.
I blinked, it was like the last Empire.
Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Shira from Quack & Co.
And today we're doing a Play This Not That of the Great Wall.
And After the Empire.
This one's from Awakened Realms. That one's from...
Grey Fox Games.
And this one's currently on GameFound as we speak, doing a full reprint campaign. That one's not currently...
Retail?
Actually not. You can't get your hands on it currently. It's
wow.
not currently available.
So this one's not available, so watch this video, you like one, or you like both, you can't get one.
Secondhand market or reprints, those things will probably happen. They did have a reprint for GameFound. In fact, both of these campaigns have had reprint campaigns on GameFound, so they're even more comparable in that sense. But past that, we'll talk with them. I'm sure it'll be available again. It was heavily sought after. They did a whole campaign. They'll be available at some point in the future. So just pin or bookmark this video and you're good to go, assuming we pick that one. Play This Not That, for context, speaking of which, probably should do that. Play This Not That is a video series in which we compare two games that we feel are worth comparing, but 14 people below feel confused as to why we're comparing them. That's okay. We feel they're worth comparing. We're going to go over the pros, the cons, prices, theme, art, all the various elements, and then tell you which one we prefer and why. It does not mean that we want one and not the other. It's usually a preference thing. I think one time I had a tie, but usually it's a question of preference, and sometimes it is not that, at least from our stance. So, let's start this off. These two games. Shira, why are these games worth comparing?
These games are worth comparing because in a similar fashion, they are both worker placement and tower defense systems.
Yep.
However, should I go into the differences?
No. Similarities first.
Yeah, they are both worker placement, Euro, point generation games, and then a huge element of tower defense, resource management.
And basically, the last element I'd include as well, is heavily focused on card tableau abilities. Getting more and more cards. In the case of the After the Empire, you're getting people and buildings, and in the case of the Great Wall, you're just getting advisors that are just leveling up your general or powering up the advisors themselves. So both of them are building up how strong you can be as you go through the game. Past that, like you said, worker placement, tower defense, points, all those things across a variable number of rounds.
Hordes coming to attack.
Yep.
Lots of hordes.
Yeah. Now there are differences. We'll get into some of those when we get into the mechanics sections. All sections down below, timestamped as always. And starting off with price. The first thing we go into and Play This Not That is the price between the two games, because that is a factor. And the retail, the reason I know it's not available at retail is I went to go find it, and you can't get this at retail at the moment. So for the sake of having the most accurate comparison, because of the fact that both the Great Wall and After the Empire theoretically have retail editions and have GameFound Kickstarter editions as well. But because we don't have any retail option for either right now, I'm going to compare the most recent base version of the GameFound editions, which is $99 for After the Empire and $122 for the Great Wall. So similar price comparisons. The main caveat I'd give is both of them have plenty of ways to spend more money. I think Great Wall has more ways to spend more money. But yeah, variable ranges, but you're looking at the $100 range plus to get both these games.
Meeple edition of the Great Wall were you referring to, or you were referring to
the
miniature?
The base miniature version of the Great Wall, I believe, is $122 once you convert it from euros. Shipping and all those things have to be factored on as well. But that's price, so factor that in. That's more of a factual thing. There's not much of an opinion. It's just data. From there, we move on to the ease of learning teach, where we start drifting into opinions. Ease of learning is both. How easy it is to actually learn the game from the rulebook. If you've done that, I don't know if you've dived into both.
I've dived into some of the rulebooks, yes.
And then how easy it is to just generally understand and or teach the game. Just the absorbability of the various game systems. You want to start with this one?
I don't think either of them are great at this task. So I'll take the Great Wall, for example. The Great Wall, the rulebook is a bit of a mess to get through. They are reprinting it, but was a bit of a mess. The iconography is poor, and player aids are poor. However, once you're up and running into the game, it is a fairly easy teach what's going on the board and how the horde cards come out and interactions. There's some little minute technicalities that you have to refer to the rulebook, but for the most part, it's smooth after that. Mm-hmm. After the Empire, I didn't get a chance to read the rulebook, so I can't speak to that.
That part, but yeah.
I think the same aspect of the general board is pretty easy and self-explanatory to learn. The complicated part with After the Empire are these chords and how the combat system works. I have played this numerous times, and to this day I still have to ask Alex to help me out with how the archers attack, how the footmen are going to attack, how the ladders affect. The horde cards that come out are the most confusing part for this.
Yeah, I think you captured it almost perfectly. Having read both rulebooks, I can tell you that After Empire's rulebook is pristine. It's a great rulebook. I had very few questions from it. The Great Wall, not the best, and my personal biggest frustration is the symbols that are literally iconography that's not in any rulebook ever.
Especially the expansions. The expansion iconography just doesn't
exist. Doesn't exist. You have to just make educated guesses and or look on the forum. So that definitely a hassle there. But I do agree that once you get up and running, this one is a little bit more smoother, and this one has a little more fiddliness in terms of the attack system. The core action phase I think is very simple. The combat system is a fiddly system of, it's not that fiddly. I think it's actually fairly smooth, but it's hard to get it locked in terms of the way you go. You have archery, then you have movement, then you have a melee, and then you repeat the cycle, but it depends on where each people are, and it depends whether you're talking about the towers, and what gets attacked depends on whether you're talking about the siege engines or the archers, and do the archers still attack the walls. A whole bunch of sequences there that are a little bit much to get into.
I think this does have some player aids. I think the player aids could have been a little bit more detailed. They were very brief in their description of how the attack, the combat system works. I think if they had gone into a little bit more detail, it would be a little bit more smooth running.
Sounds good. Any winner here, or not so much?
No, I said neither of them were winners there. Do you have a winner?
I would probably give a slight preference to After the Empire as far as a winner. I heavily value a clean rulebook, and this was there's a lot going on. Both games have a lot going on, but not so much. And the After the Empire, I felt, was a very clean rulebook. The fact that I can't get over that system as quickly in terms of what's happening, they explained it perfectly. I can't fault them. I just have to go through the cycle. So I'm going to give a minor point to After the Empire in that one. From there we go into the art and components.
Art and components. I am partial to miniatures, so therefore I heavily lean towards the Great Wall. I think Awakened Realms does a glorious job with their miniatures, especially if you have the Sun Drop version. They are so detailed and pristine. I like the wall elements over there. And I like the artwork on the Great Wall in general. I think it is more realistic and it feels more battle-esque.
Gritty?
Yeah. The one criticism I have is I don't like the actual walls. I wish these walls were actually made out of resin or some form that
PVC,
would match the miniatures in a similar fashion. Because even like the trebuchets and the catapults and all of these are all so nice. Switching over to After the Empire, I like these walls. I like how the little cubes fit inside them. I like how that is all simplified. But I think that it would be cool if these had texture or
the upgraded version does.
Right, so you don't have the upgraded version sitting in front of me, so I can't compare upgraded version to upgraded version.
The upgraded version has miniatures for the enemy units and then upgraded texture for the goods.
Cool. So I think that would help me a lot with After the Empire, but I care less for the artwork of the board and the cards. I like how it's all, like, it feels very muted and gritty, and yeah,
so I think we're mostly in alignment there. The one area I think we do differ is I like the artwork of After the Empire quite a bit. I do like the artwork of the Great Wall, but I like the color, the simple patterns. This is a little bit more not as easy to immediately see. Also, the board as well is very large with very small iconography.
Table presence is a huge thing.
Yeah, board wise, I'm gonna give the board of After the Empire a win. Past that, we're aligned with everything else. The buildings over here are much better than the buildings here. The miniatures and the siege engine and all that stuff in the Great Wall is solid. Cover art, I like the Great Wall. Cover art, both are solid.
Cover art, actually, like After the Empire.
And there we go. So that's art and components. Obviously, very subjective no matter who you are, but both solid games. I'll give both a win for that one.
Yeah.
From there we go to theme. The theme of the games.
The theme of the games is so similar, but also so different. Mm-hmm. In the Great Wall, it almost feels collaborative in a nature, that you all don't want those walls to come tumbling down. You are all working towards building them, but it is still very competitive in who gets to actually take down different cards, who gets to rush up the score point track.
Well, part of that also goes to the very nature of the games, where both of them have that siege engine, the siege mentality of being attacked by enemies, but in the Great Wall, you're all collectively defending against an incoming horde, and in After the Empire, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah. But you also feel some sense of camaraderie in After the Empire. It's like, oh, you just got sacked. Oh, I just got sacked. We're going down this track together. We left our walls wide open on both sides.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So...
Yeah. For me, theme-wise, like I said, they're very similar. I actually give strong points to After the Empire in theme, though, and specifically in the aspect that in the After the Empire, partially because of the way the invading forces work and your walls crumbling down and your castle getting sacked and all of that, I feel very much like I'm defending against an invading horde. One of my problems with the Great Wall, love the game, but one of my problems with the Great Wall has always been that I don't often feel like I'm genuinely being attacked. I feel like I'm playing a bit of a Euro game. Part of that is the abstraction of the enemies down to being cards, just little cards with placement on them. I feel like I'm playing a little mini polyomino game on top of the cards, in a way that's even further removed from Kingdom Rush, which has a similar idea to it. So I've always had a harder time visualizing being attacked. Now, the Black Powder expansion does make it better.
To ask, does the Black Powder expansion help that?
It helps it. It definitely helps it. It takes it up a huge notch. But it still feels a drop removed. I would say the interesting thing about the Black Powder expansion is it tends to feel more up a notch when you're actually having your stuff fall apart. In the Great Wall, I always feel like I'm fighting against a horde, regardless of... and part of it goes to that combat phase, the back and forth, the melee, the archers, the shooting people, how many people, relocating people around the wall.
Piles of things on either side.
Yeah, it feels like a combat. This one kind of feels like, okay, if we attacked and took them out, it doesn't feel like we attacked anything, it feels like we played a Euro game. If they actually start ripping down our towers, if they actually start hurting our troops and things like that happen, it feels a drop more. So it's a good game. I feel the theme more strongly in After the Empire.
It's interesting because the theme of the Great Wall and how it all ties in to the Great Wall in China and all the little flavor text that they actually have on the cards makes me feel more in a setting in the Great Wall. There's less flavor text over here. It feels like just a generic
medieval. 100%.
Yeah, generic medieval. And so I like that more focused theme that the Great Wall presents.
Yeah, and I'll completely give you that. I agree with you that the general theme of the Great Wall is much better. For me, it's specifically that aspect of the
disconnect between that.
Yeah. From there, we move to the larger section. The larger section, which is all over the place, which is mechanics. Mechanics of the game. This is just completely freeform. Any aspects of the games that you prefer, don't like, how you feel with them, all those things.
I'll let you start with this one.
So, a bunch of different aspects to these two games. And both games do a lot of things both the games have a lot of different areas going on, but first of all is that aspect that we talked about already, the defending together versus defending apart. That aspect that this one feels like you're doing your own thing, this one feels like you're defending together. And I don't know which one I prefer offhand in those. They both bring different elements to the table. The working together, sort of, but also not totally, works well here. And it's not a semi-co-op. You're all trying to defend the hordes. You're choosing to place on towers. Can we stop that row from invading? Can we not? And sometimes there's that aspect of, I don't really mind if the wall falls down there. I'll get points, whatever it is. And so that can work towards you or against you for the Great Wall. I like it a lot, and it works well. The exact flip side to that is the fact that in the After the Empire, watching your castle literally fall apart, watching yourself get sacked, is a huge element that you don't have that laughter kind of approach to the Great Wall. It adds an element of humor, an element of things are going to fall apart at some point. You just have to plan around the how and why. And so for me, it's not really a preference of one versus the other. It's just I just like it in that sense. But yeah, that's one off that.
I feel that After the Empire provides me more of a tighter engine. It is harder for me to get my resources engines up and running to then upgrade my castle and be actually a formidable opponent. I feel especially with the Black Powder, that you start with upgrades over here and you're getting your resource generation that much quicker. I feel like it is a lot easier both to score points and to function in the Great Wall. It feels less tight for me for a Euro. After the Empire felt a lot more tight. I do like the sense of camaraderie that you feel with the Great Wall, that I'm like, oh, I'll chip in a resource here, I'll get points, but you'll build the wall section and we won't all take shame tokens.
Or hey, let's all go get some wood, and because of that, if you close off that wood spot, we'll all collect this round.
Yeah, there's a lot more talking around here. Over After the Empire, you have a lot less table talk. If you take a position, I'm like, okay, I'll have to readjust where I'm placing my worker and stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's one of the bigger strengths I have for the Great Wall, the sense that in After the Empire, you're playing your own game. Nothing wrong with that. That's standard worker placement. But in the Great Wall, it's very collaborative. It's not a cooperative game. You're trying to win, but there's a heavy degree of, hey, if we work together, we'll all benefit. We'll all get stuff. We all want stuff. We want to build the wall. We want to take down the attacking Huns in all these areas. So there's a high sense of camaraderie between the two games.
But with After the Empire, that laughter that we get when we are faced with like 20 different swordsmen on one side and 5 archers on the other side and ladders, and it's like, can my castle actually withstand this? Or do I have to strategically plan to get ransacked? I think that's a huge element of After the Empire. I have yet to see a game where one person did not get ransacked at one point during the game. And sometimes it's actually a strategic move. And I don't know if that's a pro or a con. What are your thoughts?
I like the strategic ransacking for sure. I like the idea of kind of choosing when to fall apart. It makes you feel... The fact that you feel almost inevitable helps when it happens, and it's nice. Well, it's not nice, it's terrible, but it's hilarious, it's funny. But past that, yeah, I mean, I think I like the strategic ransacking the same way, though. The same way I like the strategic, and this happens less often in the Great Wall, but there are times when you sit there and you're like, I don't care if you all die. You can go ahead and take your shame tokens. It's okay. I'll take a shame token too. I don't mind because I think it benefits me to not help that wall. Yeah. It's the same similar sense, although it's more betrayal focused than when it happens in the Great Wall. But I like both those aspects of the strategic decision to not always defend as heavily as you can because you have to prioritize other things.
One difference, I enjoy the Great Wall because it has numerous endgame conditions. You can win by building all 3 sections of the wall. You can lose by having no wall sections remaining with the Black Powder expansion. You can trigger endgame versus the round structure. With After the Empire, it is just a straight number of rounds.
Yes. And
so I do enjoy variable end conditions. That's one quality in games that I'm starting to notice I enjoy. I don't like necessarily a fixed number of round systems.
In general, we've talked about that, yeah. Fixed number of rounds is not... I mean, the truth is Great Wall does have fixed number of rounds, but it can end earlier. Right. But on a similar note, I also like about the Great Wall the variability of the pathways forward. I think in After the Empire, while you do have different routes you can take, ultimately the same end destination always comes down to the tower defense, to the building your castle, to the ensuring you're in the lead. The Great Wall, you can take a lot... I feel is a lot more heavily divergent in the ways you can actually try to approach the game, the ways you can focus heavily on resources, heavily on attack, heavily on building up the walls. There's a lot of areas you can focus your economy on that, because of the fact that it's a collaborative experience to a degree, not cooperative, but a collaborative, it means that I can worry about the fact that you and whoever will take on the wall while I sit there and funnel resources into the pool. And then combine that, and this is the biggest thing easily, combine that with the fact that the advisors in After the Empire feel so much more impactful and meaningful than what you get over in Great Wall over After the Empire. And I like After the Empire. I think After the Empire cards are solid. I really enjoy them, and I want more of them. Every time I see them, I want to get them. Yeah. But it does not compare remotely to the feeling of the advisors in the Great Wall.
I was going to actually mention the difference in cards, the tableau building.
Yeah.
You start with a general, and then you start with 2 advisors, and you choose which one to choose for the advisor ability and whether to power it up underneath your general. And then you have the opportunity to get more and more advisors throughout the game. Those advisors, if you get the right sequence of them, which isn't too difficult to do, a lot of them mesh really well with each other, can create insane engines that you can get up and running. After the Empire, the cards are wonderful, but they don't feel as synchronous and as game-breaking and massively powerful. When I think of the Great Wall, the general and advisors are a huge core component.
They're absolutely.
I love it. The powers and abilities, powers and abilities, powers and abilities.
And After the Empire starts with a starting bonus as well, but again, not nearly the same impact.
Yeah, and I like how each general determines where you fall on the T-check, what your starting resources are. It feels so thematic with your general, and the ability that your general gives you is in sync with who they were as a character. Each general comes with a little excerpt of who they were, and the abilities line up.
Yeah, I don't pay attention that much to the flavor text. I kind of skip over it.
I have an influence in my life.
Yeah. Now, past that, I think I have 2 dings on After the Empire. 2 separate dings, not really comparison points, just, the comparison in the sense that they're different, but in After the Empire, there are 2 things I don't love about the game. One, actually not true. One is variable. The one that's more variable, although I prefer the Great Wall, is the randomness in the attacking. Both Great Wall and After the Empire have a degree of randomness, although in the Great Wall, it's where the hordes spawn, which you can then plan around. In After the Empire, it's blindfolded. It's blindfolded. You're going to flip the cards over after you've prepped, and while it feels thematically appropriate, and I don't mind it in the game, it means that After the Empire focuses a drop more towards chaos and the hilarity of what happens after chaos, compared to the Great Wall, I think, focuses a bit more on the strategic aspect. If I was looking purely at it from a stance of, I want the better player to win, as opposed to I want the person who got luckier to win, I think the Great Wall wins there. I don't mind the hilarious fun that comes with After the Empire. I like it and I enjoy it, but minor ding comparatively speaking. Second point I have is that first player aspect in After the Empire. It's a bit messy. The first player gives you this aspect where the first player always has the opportunity to gain more points, but to be hit harder. I like the concept, but it doesn't function as a catch-up mechanic in a normal sense. Because if you are first player, if you're ahead on the track and you get hit harder and you lose and you fall apart, then great, it works. But alternatively, it ends up rewarding the first player even more for continuing to be first player. And so it has happened in games where we play After the Empire and that mechanic works well to close the gap and all's good in the world. And it happens other times where the first player is able to hold their own, and then they just have more points piling up on the side, points that don't even count against them for when they do get sacked eventually. And I don't love the first player aspect. It makes the other players feel almost a drop left out, and only sometimes works to accomplish what it's designed to do. I assume designed to do. I'm just assuming at that point. But yeah.
One big mechanic with the Great Wall is your deck of cards that you are playing. I like how those are determining what actions you're going to take and how they synergize off of other people. One element I want to talk about is player count. What is your preferred player count between these games?
Oh, that's a fun one. So, for the Great Wall, my preferred player count is absolutely 3 players. Absolutely, not a question. That is my preferred player count. I'll happily play it at 2. I've played it solo. Not my best player count, but I'll happily play it at 2. I will willingly play it at 4 for the sake of spending time with those 4 people. 3 people, me and those 3 people. But definitely 3 is a strongly where I prefer this. After the Empire, I think, works better at variable player counts. I think it works better at the 2 through 4 player count. 3 is still my preference. But I think it functions better once you start drifting. I think the gap between, if 3's over here, 2 and 4 are like right next to each other. For the Great Wall, 3's over here, and 4's over here, and 2's over here. There's much larger gaps.
And then modes of play. The Great Wall can be played in
solo and cooperative.
Solo and cooperative.
Does that have a solo cooperative? No, it has.
It does not. It's 2 to 4 players. So what?
I believe the most recent printing had a solo version. Haven't played it.
Okay. Do you like the Great Wall as cooperative? Most of my plays, I think all of my plays have been competitive, so I really can't speak to the cooperative nature.
So I like it cooperatively and solo, but not nearly as much as competitive. Meaning, I just would never choose to play it cooperatively.
There are other solo cooperative games that you would choose over, and if you're choosing the Great Wall, you're going to play it competitively.
The cooperatively effectively turns it into playing it solo, but with more players. That's effectively what it comes down to. And the solo feels fine, but you have a bunch of orders from the Emperor that you're trying to achieve. So you have to get these resources. You're building them up. So you're doing all this stuff while trying not to lose, while building up things you're trying to deliver to the Emperor. And you have a certain number of rounds. You have to do all that, and it works. I enjoy the puzzle. I enjoy the puzzle more when it's just about the points. Yeah. And then lastly, the last thing I'll note is, and this comes back sort of to the first play aspect, is the Great Wall, I have a harder time getting a sense of who's winning until the very end. And
those cards up there, the end game scoring points,
chunks of points,
switched games around completely. And if you don't pay attention to them till the end, you're in trouble. It could be
60 points.
Yeah, it literally could be 60 points.
But I like that in games. I like it in games. The problem with After the Empire, to a degree, is After the Empire, while you could recover fairly well, especially if the first player gets sacked, it's still, you get to a certain point in the game where if you're behind enough...
I think it is a harder recovery in After the Empire than it is in the Great Wall.
The Great Wall,
I think the Great Wall, you can have a latent engine building and then soar through till the very end in the Great Wall. I think it is much harder to do in After the Empire.
I agree. So, anything else to add, or play this, not that?
Expansions?
Expansions. Ooh, yes, expansions. So, After Empire has no expansions to comment on, so we'll eventually see them. I believe they are planned. I've talked to designers. I believe they are coming in some way, shape, or form. I believe there are multiple plans, so we'll see. And I'm excited for them.
We briefly talked about the the Black Powder expansion, which incorporates the Euro side and the fighting the tower defense side a lot more.
A little stronger.
So... But can you speak to any of the other expansions?
I have not played the other expansions yet. I've only felt the need to dive into Black Powder, because the Black Powder really brought it to a point. Yeah. And there are other expansions that I want to try. I've read the rules when I first got the game. Haven't bothered tabling them yet. It gives you more variability, more options to dive into it. I haven't felt the need to incorporate them. I'm sure I will at some point. But it gives you that flexibility. If you're one of those people who walks into a game and is like, I want expansions, this one already has them for you.
Alright, I think that's all the points I want to
address. Play this, not that. I think it's pretty clear where we are so far, but play this, not that. I'll go first in this one. I like both these games a lot. I reviewed both these games on my channel a while ago.
They're both in your permanent collection.
They're both, not necessarily.
Really?
Not necessarily, no. No.
Oh, I don't know if I know where this is going then.
Oh, I don't think it changes much. I reviewed both these games a long time ago. I believe I reviewed After the Empire first, then The Great Wall. I don't remember exactly, but both were roughly a year ago. After the Empire, I gave a 4 to 5. The Great Wall, I gave a 4 to 5. I liked both of these games a lot. As I have continued to dive into them, as I have continued to play them, The Great Wall has moved up to a 4.5 for me. I like this one a lot. I still don't give it the full 5, primarily because I don't feel as strongly that I'm dealing with hordes. I don't. I wish something about the game, and I don't know because you have to kind of change the whole game.
I like the hordes. Yeah. I don't mind those.
I don't mind them. I just don't. I don't feel as strongly like I'm being attacked as heavily. That's my big ding against it. At that, and the fact that it is a long game, and till they get the whole play rate and the accessibility and all those things straightened out, I'm not giving this a 5. It's a 4.5. It's moved up for me. I like it a lot. After the Empire, stayed at a 4. I like it. I enjoy it. It's a solid game. I continue to have fun every time I play it. As far as the permanent collection note, I don't see the Great Wall leaving anytime soon.
Okay.
If it ever did leave, it would be because it's long enough that it doesn't get tabled, but I think we're going to table it. We have people who all like it, so why not? If this devolved to me just playing it solo, I have other games I'd probably play solo over it. But as long as people who are in my group who keep liking and playing it, I will keep the Great Wall around.
Is After the Empire going somewhere?
It's not going anywhere now. It's not. Absolutely not, especially knowing that expansions are on the way.
Yeah.
but I wouldn't call it permanent collection.
Okay.
4 to 5s are good, but 4 to 5s do not mean that they stay, especially because I'm fortunate enough to play a lot of good games. I think After the Empire is safe for a while. Permanent, that's a harder thing to say.
So in terms of my own permanent collection, both of these are in my own permanent collection. It's been a while since I gave them a hard review, but I am leaning towards lining up with you. The Great Wall etches out just a tad ahead. From a maturity standpoint, I feel like it just is more evolved. It feels more, the artwork, the components, it etches out just a drop ahead. I'm excited to see, I would like to see the revised rulebook. I am hoping that player aids get included as well. But the Great Wall is still a hilarious... Not the Great Wall. After the Empire is still hilarious. I love pulling this out. The devolvement of chaos that happens every single time they attack. You're like, oh well, if they only turned a corner and would have walked into my empty field, I would be sacked.
So like, our last game, I had like 2 walls and I had nothing on either side. And I was like, just please don't look. Please don't look around the corner. Come from those...
The comedic side of the theme of like these hordes are coming at you from one direction, and if only they had veered around the corner to see your empty wall, it's hilarious.
That is not an uncommon view.
This literally it makes it so much fun. So I am happy both of them are in my permanent collection. But if I had to choose one and play this not that, it would actually be the Great Wall.
It's a great game. Both are great games.
Both are fantastic.
That's this. That has been the Play This Not That. The Great Wall seems to win for both of us.
Yes.
Both solid games. This is over on GameFound as we speak. When you're watching this, it may be gone already, but there'll be reprints, probably, maybe. Who really knows? Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Shira from Quack and Go.
And have a good one.